Mrs. James Dillingham Young put her arms warmly about him and called him Jim. You've already met her. She's Della. Della finished her crying and cleaned the marks of it before her face. She stood by the window and looked out with no interest. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a gift. She put aside as much as she could for months, with this result. $20 a week isn't much. Everything had cost more than she expected. It always happened like that. Only $1.87 to buy a gift for Jim. Her Jim. She had had many happy hours planning something nice for him. Something nearly good enough. Something almost worth the honor of belonging to Jim. There was a looking glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you've seen this kind of looking glass that's placed in $8 furnished rooms. It's very narrow. A person could only see a little of himself at a time. However, he was very thin and moved quickly. He might be able to get a good view of himself. Della, being quite thin, had mastered this art. Suddenly, she turned from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brightly, but her face had lost its color. Quickly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its complete length. The James Dillingham Youngs were very proud of two things which they owned. One thing was Jim's gold watch. It had once belonged to his father, and long ago it had belonged to his father's father. The other thing was Della's hair. If a queen had lived in the room near theirs, Della would have washed and dried her hair where the queen could see it. Della knew her hair was more beautiful than any queen's jewels and gifts. If a king lived in the same house with all of his riches, Jim would have looked at his watch every time they met. Jim knew that no king had anything so valuable. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, shining like a falling stream of brown water. It reached below her knee. It almost made itself into a dress for her. And then she put it up on her head again, nervously and quickly. Once she stopped for a moment and stood while a tear or two ran down her face. She put on her old brown coat. She put on her old brown hat. With the bright lights still in her eyes, she moved quickly out the door and down to the street. Where she stopped, the sign said, Mrs. Sonfrey, hair articles of all kinds. Up to the second floor Della ran and stopped to get her breath. Mrs. Sonfron, large, too white, cold-eyed, looked at her. Will you buy my hair? Asked Della. I buy hair, said Miss Sonfron. Take your hat off and let me look at it. Down fell the brown waterfall. $20, said Mrs. Sonfron, lifting the hair to feel its weight. Give it to me quick, said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours seemed to fly. She was going from one shop to another to find a gift for Jim. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the shops. She had looked in every single shop in the city. It was a gold watch chain, very simply made. Its value was in its rich and pure material. Because it was so plain and simple, you knew that it was very valuable. All good things were like this. It was good enough for the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that Jim must have it. It was like him, quietness and value. Jim and the chain both had quietness and value. She paid $21 for it, and she hurried home with the chain and 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim could look at his watch and learn the time anywhere he might be. Though the watch was so fine, it had never had a fine chain. He sometimes took it out and looked at it only when nobody else could see him do it. When Della arrived home, her mind quieted a little. She began to think more reasonably. She started to try to convert the sad marks of what she had done. Love and large-hearted giving, when added together, can leave deep marks. It is never easy to cover these marks, dear friends. Never easy. Within 40 minutes, her head looked a little better. With her short hair, she looked wonderfully like a schoolboy. She stood at the looking glass for a long time. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he looks at me a second time, he'll They'll say I look like a girl who sings and dances for money. But what could I do? What could I do for $1.87? At 7, Jim's dinner was ready for him. Jim was never late. Dilla held the watch chain in her hand and sat near the door where he always entered. When she heard his steps in the hall, her face lost color for a moment. She often said little prayers quietly about simple everyday things, and now she said, "Please God, make him think I'm still pretty." And the door opened, and Jim stepped in. He looked very thin, and he was not smiling. Poor fellow, he was only 22, and with a family to take care of. He needed a new coat, and he had nothing to cover his cold hands. Jim stopped inside the door. He was as quiet as a hunting dog when it's near a bird. His eyes looked strangely at Della, and there was an expression in them that he could not understand. It filled her with fear. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor anything she had been ready for. He simply looked at her with that strange expression on his face. Della went to him. "Jim, dear," she cried, "don't look at me like that. I had my hair cut off, and I sold it. I couldn't live through Christmas without giving you a proper gift. My hair will grow again. You won't care, will you? My hair grows very fast. It's Christmas, Jim. Let's be happy. You know what a beautifully nice gift I got for you." "You cut off your hair," said Jim slowly. He seemed to labor to understand what happened. He seemed not to feel sure he knew. "I cut it off and sold it," said Della. "Don't you like me now? I'm me, Jim. I'm the same me without my hair." Jim looked around the room. "You say your hair's gone," he said. "You don't have to look for it," said Della. "It's sold. I sold it, and it's gone. It's the night before Christmas. Be good to me, because I sold it for you. Maybe the hairs on my head could be counted, but nobody could ever count my love for you. Can we eat dinner now, Jim?" Jim put his arms around his Della. "For 10 seconds, let us look in another direction. $8 a week, or $1 million a year. How different are they? Someone may give you an answer, but it will all be wrong. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among one of them. My meaning will be explained soon." From inside the coat, Jim took something tied in paper. He threw it upon the table. "I want you to understand me, Del. Nothing like a haircut could make me love you any less. But if you'll open that, you may know why I felt the way I did when I came in." White fingers pulled off the paper, and then a cry of joy, and then a change to tears, for there lay the comb. The comb that Della had seen in the shop window and loved for a long time. Beautiful comb, with jewels, perfect for her beautiful hair. She had known they cost too much for her and for her to buy them. She had looked at them without the least hope of ever owning them, and now they were there. They were hers, but her hair was gone. But she held them to her heart, and at last was able to look up and say, "My hair grows fast, Jim." And then she jumped up and cried, "Oh, oh!" Jim had not seen his gift yet. She held it out to him in her open hand. The gold seemed to shine softly, as if it were their own warm and loving spirit. "Isn't it perfect, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at your watch 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how they look together." Jim sat down and smiled. "Della, let's put our Christmas gifts away and keep them a while. They're too nice to use now. I sold the watch to get the money to buy the comb, and now I think we should just have our dinner. The Magi, as you may know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the newborn Christ child. most valuable thing he owned in order to buy a gift for the other. But let me speak a last word to the wise of these days. Of all who give gifts, these two were the most wise. Of all who give and receive gifts, such as they are, the most wise. Everywhere they are the wise ones. They are the Magi. I hope you guys enjoyed. That is one of my favorite Christmas gifts. Or that's one of my favorite Christmas stories. It's just about being absolutely selfless, and literally selling the most valuable thing that you own in order to get something wonderful for somebody else. And they both got a gift that accompanied their partner's most valuable asset. You know, Jim bought Della a comb because she has beautiful hair. Della cut her hair off to buy a pocket watch chain. And obviously Jim sold the pocket watch to buy the comb. So now they just have the halves. It's such a silly juxtaposition, you know. And yeah, it reminds me so much of a gift that I gave to somebody when I was a child. I guess I'll tell you my own Christmas story. So, one of my close friends growing up, I was about 8 years old, I want to say, for this story. My friend's birthday was very close to Christmas, and she had a kind of like birthday / Christmas party. Like, she had a birthday party for all the kids, and then the parents had a Christmas party for all the adults. So it was like the adults and the kids got to have a fun time. So I've always been known to be somebody who likes to make handmade gifts. I just think that handmade gifts are more personal. I don't know, handmade gifts are my thing. Back in the day, I used to do like a bunch of like arts and crafts, like when I was a kid. And then I moved on to like clay stuff when I was a teenager. And now as an adult, I crochet, so everybody gets like crocheted stuff. Like one of my best friends right now, I'm making her a flower coaster. So when you put the coaster on the table, it works as just like a regular coaster. But when you roll it up and put it in its holder, it looks like a bouquet of flowers. Her and her boyfriend just recently got a house, and I wanted to get her like kind of like a housewarming gift. And I thought that would be nice. Everybody needs coasters to protect your furniture, and yeah, I made them her favorite colors, and I think she'll really like it. But anyway, back to my story. Her name is Jamie. Okay. Reminder, I was 8 years old at the time too. Now she has spelled her name Jaime, like almost like the French word for I like. That's specifically why her parents spelled it that way, is because her name is Jamie, but it kind of looks French for I like, you know, or I love. Anyway, I made a collage of pictures of us, our friends, and things that we liked, and I cut it out in her name, Jamie. But me, being 8 years old, misspelled her name, and I spelled it Jamie. And to preface this, I realized I spelled her name wrong right before she opened gifts, because they put a cake out that said Happy Birthday Jamie, and I was like, oh no, I spelled her name wrong. And so I started to kind of get emotional. I was like, I screwed this up. I worked so hard on this gift, but she's gonna hate it. She's gonna think I'm a bad friend because I spelled her name wrong. And so she goes to open gifts, she just looked at me and she's like, Sleepy, you can't hurt my feelings. There's nothing you could have put in there that'll hurt my feelings. And so anyway, I said, okay, well, will you open it last then? Will you open my gift last? So that if you are disappointed, you can be disappointed at the end. And she was like, okay, that's fine. And she opened the gift, and she saw it was like a collage of all of her favorite things, pictures of us. Yeah, it was just this beautiful collage that I did, and I cut it out in the name, and I made it into like a sign that she could hang on like a wall or something. But again, I made it into her name, and it was misspelled. And she looked at me, and I still have this picture to this day. I literally still have this picture that my mom took. She looked at me, she put the collage on the table, and she gave me the biggest hug, and she said, "This is the best birthday gift I've ever gotten. Thank you." And I'm not even joking you. She put that sign on her door when we were 8 years old, and she kept that sign on her door all throughout high school. And it was one of those things of, you know, I put a lot of thought into it, but then I thought it was the worst gift ever because I misspelled her name, and she didn't care. She just was like, I know the effort. She's like, who cares about 2 letters being in the wrong spot? You know? And yeah, I guess that was just really, really sweet, and probably my most memorable gift-giving moment was that one of me giving somebody